Sabah al-Khair, good morning dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Robert Martin, Nasser Mashni and Yusuf Ahmed al-Rimawi.
Palestine Remembered is Australia's only English-language radio program that is totally dedicated to Palestine. We'd like to welcome those listening on 855 and those that will join us on podcast at 3cr.org.au.
Thanks for joining us. Stay with us and enjoy the episode.
Yawm al-Ard, Land Day, March 30. On this land day by Mahmoud Darwish. We have on this land that which makes life worth living. We have on this land all of that which makes life worth living. April's hesitation, the aroma of bread at dawn, a woman beseeching of men, the writings of Licious, love's beginning, moss on a stone, mother standing on a flute's thread, and the invader's fear of memories. We have on this land that which makes life worth living. September's end, a woman leaving 40 behind, with all of her apricots, the hour of sunlight in prison, a cloud reflecting a swarm of creatures, a people's applause for those whose face their own erasure with a smile, and the tyrant's fear of a song. We have on this land all that which makes life worth living. On this land, the lady of our land, the mother of all beginnings and the mother of all ends. She was called Palestine. Her name later became Palestine, my lady. Because you are my lady, I have all that which makes life worth living. A poem by Mahmoud Darwish. 44 years ago, the Israeli police shot 6 Palestinian citizens of Israel dead as they were protesting against the Israeli government's expropriation of thousands of acres of Palestinian land in the Galilee. Since then, March 30 has been known as Land Day, Yawm al-Ard, and it is an important date in the Palestinian political calendar. This year, Palestinians will be marking Land Day at home amid the COVID-19 pandemic, which, as we know, has left much of the world's population locked down. Being confined to their homes or their villages and towns is nothing new for a Palestinian, something we experience daily, something we take in our stride. Indeed, for Palestinians who have been caged in and imprisoned by Israel for over 70 years, COVID-19 is nothing new for them. This experience of isolation, disconnection, curfew that we're experiencing now in the West and the wider world is nothing new to a Palestinian. Land Day also marks the second anniversary of the Great Return March from Gaza. We're honoured to be joined today by a special guest from Gaza, a dear friend of the show, Palestinian of repute and merit, who studied in Melbourne, Dr. Mosheer, who is the Professor of Discourse Analysis and Linguistics at the English Department of the Islamic University of Gaza. Good morning, Mosheer. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to talk to you and to Yusuf.
Fantastic. Well, our listeners haven't heard from Yusuf for a little while, so welcome, Yusuf.
Hello, Nasser. Hello, our listeners. Hello, our dear friend Mosheer. I'm glad to be with you again and looking forward to hearing from our friend in Gaza.
Thank you very much, Yusuf. It's really a great delight and pleasure to talk to you. It's been like 10 years since we last met, since I left Australia in 2010. So
yes, before I think it's worth mentioning that Dr. Mosheer Amer isn't just an expert on the issues in Gaza, but also he's a close friend to to us, myself and Nasser, and also he was on the show maybe around 10 years ago or even more, talking about the findings of his very interesting PhD thesis. So before we move on to the situation in Gaza, do you want to quickly brief us about your thesis, because it was really interesting. I still remember that you put so much time and effort in analyzing the New York Times representation and coverage of the second Intifada. So, if in a nutshell, if you could summarize the findings, and then we'll start with the situation in Gaza.
My PhD dissertation, which I did at the University of Melbourne, was basically looking into the coverage of the New York Times of the Palestinian Intifada, the second Palestinian Intifada, spanning from the year 2000 to 2003. And I highlighted the way that the New York Times sort of favors Israeli narratives and Israeli rationales and explanations of the situation along two lines. The first one is that the Israelis are always on the defense, acting in self-defense, and the Palestinians are attacking, although the facts on the grounds are to the contrary. The Palestinians are people under occupation, and they're acting in self-defense against a brutal military occupation that dispossessed them, displaced them, and subjects them to a draconian military images. But the way the New York Times sort of frames the situation or events on the ground was very much biased in favor of the Israelis at the expense of the Palestinians. The second one was the delegitimization of the late Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat, as if the New York Times reporters and editors were squarely pointing the finger at Arafat as responsible for the events, for the violence that was ensuing at that time between the Israeli occupation army and the Palestinians, mainly the Palestinian resistance. So with that framing, the sort of uncritical reader would perceive the Palestinians as the aggressors, as the attackers, and the Israelis as acting in self-defense. And I highlighted the way that the media sort of manipulates certain media, U.S. media, mainly the New York Times in my case study, was prefers the Israeli explanations, and this really distorts the way readers understand or should understand the situation, and it highlights the key role that the media plays in sort of opinion shaping, knowledge gaining, and also in that case manipulating how people perceive events around the world. That's in a very briefly.
That's a great nutshell. Now, Mosheer, you've been back in Gaza now for 10 years. Tell us a little bit of what life is like in Gaza. I mean, you've been very busy. You're now a professor at the Islamic University of Gaza. You're married, 5 children.
I know that the world is in a state of lockdown everywhere right now, sort of from the 4 corners of the world. And this is only 1 month or even less than a month that the world is in lockdown. Remember that since I got back from Australia, lovely people of Australia, and my really wonderful experiences studying and living there for a short time. We in the Gaza Strip have been in lockdown, a state of lockdown since 2006 for the past 14 years. We've been unable to move freely in and out of Gaza. Remember, Gaza is only 365 kilometers square, and you have got 2 million people live on this very short, tiny enclave. So you're talking about a population density of 1 kilometer per 5,000 people. So you can imagine that we've been living in this state of shutdown, being deprived of the ability to move in and out of Gaza, being subjected to a suffocating siege that really affected very negatively all aspects of life. And we'll talk about this. But over the past 10 years since I returned home from Australia, I haven't been able to travel outside Gaza. And we've been really going through very difficult conditions in terms of access to essential needs, the conditions, the health conditions, it has been deteriorating for a very long time. There were repeated wars by the Israeli occupation army against the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip, and this has really led to so many lives, killing of so many lives and injuring of so many people. And then we really went through very, very difficult conditions.
Mosheer, on this point, I want you to elaborate on the time of hostilities and warfare. You witnessed two brutal attacks, two wars on Gaza in the last 10 years, November 2012 and June-July 2014. Tell us about how life looks like in Gaza during warfare.
Well, it was really...
And when we say war, it's not war. It's Israeli war on Palestinian civilians.
Correct. And between that, this war and the other war and the 2020, we had some really a number of sort of military escalations. I mean, this is sort of a euphemism for aggressive wars, short-term wars against the Palestinian population. It's really difficult. War is war. I mean, like, you've got really bombardment, you've got really military attacks, you've got lots of civilian, innocent people killed, destruction of homes. We were huddled in our homes, hoping that, not an Israeli missile or an Israeli rocket, bombs, attacks your home. There was a high sense of fear for your lives, for the life of your loved ones, for your children, your family. And then there was a shortage of, goods and essential needs. You're not able to leave out your home. It's war. So it's really very scary and frightening. But we, the Palestinians, we got, I don't want to say accustomed, but because of these repeated wars, we've sort of grown a sense of resilience and steadfastness and a will to live. We try to extract normalcy out of all this sort of extraordinary conditions and severe conditions imposed by the Israeli occupation army against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. It's really very, very, it has been very difficult for myself, for my family, for my loved ones, and all the people in the Gaza Strip. And I could always draw a stark contrast between living in Gaza and living in peaceful Australia, for example, where there is no shortage of electricity. I mean, we sort of, for the past 10 years, we had only 8 years of electricity.
8 hours.
8 hours of electricity, pardon me, on a 24-hour cycle. So imagine that you don't have electricity for the rest of the day, or you have like only 8 hours of electricity. And then you're talking about the conditions of, for example, drinking water. I mean, there was a stats the other day, a report by the United Nations organization, doing that the sort of drinking water is contaminated for like 90% of drinking water in Gaza. 97% is contaminated because of high salinity percentages in the water. So people sort of depend on, sort of desalination plants, and so they buy water, the drinking water. And you have all the other aspects, the educational situation, you have the health conditions, you have the economic sector is near decimated because of these repeated wars. And also because of the, sort of the ongoing Israeli blockade of the Gaza Strip for the past 14 years. You have like 95% of factories been in the Gaza Strip. We're talking about a small economy, not like Australia's economy, basically destroyed. Or, the Israelis prevented, the access or entry of essential needs or raw material for people to have a decent life, for factories to run, for people to build their homes or and other essential things. So you have a catastrophic, I would say, sort of consequences for this crippling siege on the Gaza Strip, Israeli occupation crippling siege on the Gaza Strip. And it's really time for people to speak out and say, well, this is enough. Enough is enough. Enough that Gaza has been going through this really suffocating siege. And I'm not saying this. All world organizations, UN organizations, and international NGOs have been calling for an end to the siege on the Gaza Strip because of the very grave consequences it has had on the people, on the civilian population in the Gaza Strip. There was a report by the UN in the year 2012, that said, a very famous report, by the way, that said that at that time that Gaza will be unlivable by the year 2020. And here we are now in the year 2020. And the report is really right. I mean, if you consider any aspect of life in the Gaza Strip, it's really decimated. It's really sort of close to near sort of finishing because of the systematic and methodical destruction of all these aspects, the economic sector, the health sector, the educational sector, and all other sectors in the Gaza Strip. And this had really serious repercussions on life, the quality of life in the Gaza Strip, and the quality of life for civilians there.
So, Mosheer, Corona has gone everywhere throughout the world.
Right.
A week and a bit ago, we had 2 confirmed cases into Gaza. Can you give us an update?
Just last night, yeah.
Yeah, give us an update of what the situation is like.
Correct. Yeah, last night the health authorities here in the Gaza Strip have declared that that 2 cases tested positive for the COVID-19, and this brings the total number of infections in the Gaza Strip to 12. Now, this is some might say, well, this number is not comparable to the large number of cases in other countries. But when we're talking about one of the most densely populated areas on the planet Earth, we're talking about the Gaza Strip, an area of 365 square kilometers, 2 million people living there, and you have a population density of like 5,000 people living per square kilometer, then you can imagine what if this coronavirus gets into sort of the populated areas, gets into Gaza. By the way, these 12 cases were quarantined once they entered the borders or the border crossings with Gaza. So they are immediately sort of quarantined, placed under sort of obligatory quarantine. So what if one infection was got into sort of the Gaza proper, as they say? That would lead to really disastrous consequences with this very large number of people living there and very small area. So you're talking about a sort of that would really the virus would really dangerously spread so fast amongst the people. And we're talking about thousands, God forbid, of death. You know, about big or sort of well-developed countries have been really sort of suffering under the spread of the outbreak of the virus. So we're talking about a place, the Gaza Strip, that has really very poor health conditions as a result of the suffocating siege, the Israeli siege for the past 14 years. And there is severe shortage of medical staff, severe shortage of medical supplies. You know, remember that there are 70 ICU beds in Gaza, in the whole Gaza Strip, for 2 million people, only 70 ICU beds, and only 65 ventilators for 2 million people. This is according to Physicians for Human Rights organization. So you can imagine, or perhaps you cannot imagine, sort of the consequences of an outbreak of a coronavirus in the Gaza Strip. So everybody is bracing for a worst case scenario, God forbid, that an outbreak will happen in the Gaza Strip. That would really put us really in a very, very difficult and unimaginable conditions. So the health authorities, as well as the World Health Organization and other international NGOs, are working very hard day and night in order to prevent sort of an outbreak of the virus in the Gaza Strip. And they've been calling for the blockade to be lifted on the Gaza Strip, to allow for sort of medical supplies, essential medical needs, sort of masks and gowns and other essential medicines to be entered into Gaza Strip, be sort of brought into the Gaza Strip to prevent to prevent a catastrophe that would happen in the Gaza Strip. Let's politics aside. Now, human life everywhere matters. So this is, again, I'm calling on the Israeli occupation. I'm calling on all people around the world, all governments, to intervene actively and to prevent a catastrophe from taking place in the Gaza Strip, given that the suffocating siege is really nearly decimated all sort of the health sector. Remember that, for the past 2 years, there have been the Palestinian Great Return March of Return, and for the past sort of 24 months or so. And that put the health system in the Gaza Strip under duress, because of, you're talking about 350 people have been killed by these peaceful protesters, were killed by the Israeli occupation snipers, and you've got around...
Including journalists and nurses.
Journalists and nurses as well. And also you have like close to 20,000 people injured. And a lot of these people were, had their limbs sort of amputated because the Israeli snipers were targeting their limbs and, their legs and hands and so on. So that number of wounded, that huge number of people wounded, 20,000 people, had already sort of nearly incapacitated sort of the health sort of sector in the Gaza Strip. And now we have a coronavirus. So we're talking about a sort of, again, a catastrophe of unimaginable magnitude. God forbids that an outbreak happens in Gaza. So,
Mosheer, on another positive note that shows the resilience of Palestinians under catastrophic situations, especially in Gaza. I want you to talk to us about a workshop you supervised and led in December last year about English poetry in some of the that included competitions and workshop involving university students and probably high school students about English poetry. Tell us about that.
Thanks a lot, Yusuf. I mean, I'm trying to paint a grim picture of what's going on in Gaza for the past years and in light of the sort of coronavirus. But I must say that there are also other positive aspects. Thanks, Yusuf, again. I mean, that there is life here. It's not like all doom and gloom here. I mean, people here are very resilient. People here are steadfast. People here are struggling for self-determination, for a chance to live like any other people around the world. So there is life going on here. There's cultural life as much as they could. There is an educational sort of aspects of life and the like. And anyone who would like to follow what's going on in Gaza and in Palestine would really appreciate the resilience of the Palestinian people. And here we're talking about the resilience of the Gazan population. So as a university professor teaching English and linguistics and the media, and also the head of the English department at the university here in Gaza, I sort of supervised an event which called the English poetry event, which showcases the talents and the abilities of our wonderful English language students and English literature students. So we put together a 5-day sort of English poetry fair where students showcased their talents in sort of looking at the different historical periods of the English poetry. We're talking about the metaphysical poetry or the Victorian poetry, Elizabethan poetry, and 21st century poetry, American literature and English literature and world literature, and as well as Palestinian literature. So they had sort of different sections, and each group of students worked on how to present the poetic era, for example, the metaphysical era, in a very creative way. So the event was really very successful, and people were amazed at the talents and the abilities and the creativity of our English language students. And you could really say, oh my God, these people deserve to live in freedom. These are wonderful talents, young, bright people who deserve a chance to live a normal life like any other young people around the world. And it went for 5 days, and we had like schools, students visiting us. You had people from NGOs, international, and others coming and really appreciating the effort and the talent that the students put into this English literature fair. I was very much delighted, and I hope that one day Gaza will be free and one day Palestine will be free, so that these students when they graduate, they can contribute to humanity and to the society like other people's everywhere.
It's fantastic, that initiative, Mosheer. And, for our listeners to realize, when you say 5,000 people per square kilometre, in Australia, that's 3. The population density in Australia is 3 people per square kilometre. Now, you need to multiply, the space that an Australian occupies in their normal life between home and the office, etc. You need to multiply that by almost 2,000 people in that same space to get an understanding of what it's like in Gaza.
Yes.
So the reality of Gazans like yourself, Mosheer, to be able to live with hope and expectation and deliver on programs like this with a view to one day joining the world community as equal citizens and delivering on that promise is really a fabulous testament to yourself, but also the Palestinians. So we're so very proud of you, Mosheer, and all of our people.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nasser. I mean, I had the opportunity to live in 2 worlds. The wonderful country of Australia and the wonderful people of Australia, and also going back home and drawing this stark contrast, which again, it only sort of reaffirmed my belief in humanity, my belief in the need that we all need to act for justice and peace everywhere, not only for the Palestinian people, but all oppressed people around the world. I mean, the Palestinian cause sort of epitomizes, the struggle for justice, the struggle for determination, self-determination, and the struggle against all kinds of manipulation and brainwashing and, oppression that is done by dictatorial and oppressive regimes against the vulnerable, against the underdog. And I take this belief with me. I mean, my experience living in Australia for 5 years, having a good education there and sort of coming in contact with wonderful people, really reaffirmed my sort of belief in the need that we all need to work together in order to put an end to occupation, to put an end to colonization. And Palestine, I believe, given that I am a Palestinian and a human being, is the starting point for a struggle, for a world struggle for justice and peace everywhere. I think what the coronavirus teaches us is that we are all in it together, all people, all humanity must act together, must cooperate to save lives everywhere, irrespective of religion, race, and ethnicity or geographical location. And because coronavirus doesn't distinguish on the basis of race and religion and geography. And therefore, this is a very moral lesson, an important moral lesson that we all need to learn, that we human beings everywhere must act and must really reprioritize, again, draw our priorities again, instead of militarism and wars and sort of blockades and oppression, to put a lot of money and effort into science, into technology, into the prevention of disease, prevention of war, improving human life everywhere. Because as the coronavirus started from a small area in some part of the world, it really infected the whole world. And so what happens in one area of the world really affects what happens in all over the world. So I think this is a very important lesson that we all must get, hopefully when this corona pandemic nightmare ends, hopefully soon, that all human beings must cooperate and work together to end all forms of injustice around the world.
Well, of course, we listen with huge admiration to the Palestinian resilience and resistance, and we talk about the never-ending quest for freedom and independence, especially the people of Gaza after prolonged, tightened siege. But also the time has come for the international community, because they are the ones who have been following what's been happening in Gaza on a micro level, to stand up and to speak up against the injustices of the continued siege in Gaza and the continued occupation of Palestine. I guess, Dr. Mosheer, speaking with you might require much longer than a few minutes to cover the situation in Gaza, but we will definitely be back. We were delighted to hear from you after this time, and we'll be looking forward to hearing more positive news from Palestine in the future. We've been listening to Dr. Mosheer Amer. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Yusuf and Nasser, for having me. It's a pleasure, and thank you for giving me the opportunity opportunity to tell the good people of Australia what's happening in Gaza, and I look really forward to talking to you, inshallah, on other occasions.
Fantastic. Thanks so very much, Mosheer.